Hello, St. Philippians. I hope you are doing well. We live in an interesting time in human history. Religion in general and Christianity in particular seem to be more and more irrelevant to the average person in our day and age. It's interesting because fewer and fewer people are outright against religion. Instead, it's really the plausibility for Christianity and religion that is more on the decline, especially among younger people. Of all the options available to folks today in the 21st century, Christianity seems to be becoming less and less viable. And it's against this backdrop that in June of 2018, British Parliament invited the Reverend Timothy Keller to make an address to them on the subject of what can Christianity offer our society in the 21st century. We discussed his message at our last Young Adult Fellowship, and I wanted to share some of it with you, as I think few things could be as timely as articulating the relevance and the value of the Christian faith in our 21st century. So if you like, you can find the entire address on YouTube. I highly recommend it. Keller, he uses one verse from the Sermon on the Mount for the basis of his message to Parliament. It's Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, where Jesus tells his followers, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." You see, in the ancient world, salt functioned not just as a seasoning to help with flavor, but also as a preservative. Without refrigeration, salt was essential for keeping things from going bad and decaying. So salt, it had this dual function. On the one hand, it was a savory seasoning, and it brought out the best in food. And on the other hand, it was a preservative. It kept the food from going bad. And so Keller, he uses this teaching from Jesus, who said that his followers were supposed to be the salt of the earth, that is, the salt of human society, and that they are supposed to bring out the best in society, and they are to keep society from decay. And so Keller, he makes three basic points. First, he argues that Christianity has in fact been salt in the past by bringing out the best in our world. Did you know that it was Christianity that was responsible for much of the progress in Western civilization when it comes to human rights? Before Christianity, the Western world had a strong shame and honor culture where the community trumped the individual. By and large, individuals were unimportant, and really only the clan or the tribe mattered. The idea of harming someone was bad, not so much because the other was important, but that doing so was a sign that you were personally weak. Treating another with kindness was not so much about loving the other person, but about being seen as strong yourself. But then Christianity introduced a new ethic. Instead of loving others for the sake of ourselves, we are to love others for their own sake. This was an other-regarding ethic as opposed to a self-regarding ethic. And it came from Christianity, and it completely changed the course of Western civilization. For the first time, people believed it was best to love others for their sake instead of our own sakes. Loving your neighbor stemmed from a core doctrine of Christianity, that all people are made in God's image. In the ancient world, slavery was a common, accepted institution, and the first person that we know of to argue against slavery as an institution was Gregory, the Bishop of Nyssa in the 4th century. He said, "How much to buy and sell the God-formed human being? For Jesus Christ knows what the worth of human nature is, says an entire cosmos is not worth exchanging for a human soul. Who can buy a man or sell a man once you realize that he's the image of God?" He was the first voice in the world, Nyssa was, to stand up and say that slavery was wrong as an institution. And you can see how it trickled down to our world today, where we take for granted that every human being, regardless of race or gender or class or any other distinction, every human being has inalienable human rights. But Christianity didn't just cause change regarding the institution of slavery. It changed even ancient sexuality for the good. You see, in the ancient world, sex was used to uphold the social order. If you were a rich, wealthy man, you could sleep with anyone you wanted to. But this wouldn't have been the case for his wife. Much less, if you were a poor woman, you were not allowed to refuse a man of a higher status. But Christianity comes along and says that sex always ought to be consensual and within a safe covenant relationship. And that was a radical idea in the world. Every human has infinite dignity and worth because they are made in God's image. And all the justice for human rights that we strive for today is actually deeply indebted to Christianity. In fact, Keller goes so far as to say that Christianity in the past has been sought so much that to even ask what Christianity can offer us today is a little like saying, "What have you done for me lately?" But if Christianity was sought in the past in that it brought out the best in the world, it may be more of a preservative going forward. It can help keep our society from decay. And that's Keller's second point. Have you ever realized that at the root of our society lies a massive contradiction? We are one of the most just societies in the history of the world. We strive for the freedom and equality of every person on the earth. No other society has aimed for that. We have massively high moral ideals. But the contradiction comes in when you ask why we ought to fight for these things. You see, we live in a day when it's entirely wrong and out of place to tell anyone what they are to do or believe. We are told that we are free to do whatever we want as long as we don't hurt anyone else. But who gets to say what is good and what is bad, what's harmful and what's caring? It's a massive contradiction to hold people to the high standard of justice and equality that we do, but when we lack the moral foundation and the moral sources for telling them to do anything at all. And it's a tremendous danger because when we run up against people who don't share our values, all we can do is yell at one another. Christianity doesn't pretend not to be exclusive, and instead it admits its exclusivity. And it tells other people, whether you're atheistic or scientific or religious, that you too are exclusive. The question's not whether you're exclusive in your beliefs, but rather which beliefs, which set of them, leads to the most flourishing. And yet again, it's the Christian message of love that is rooted in God Himself that has proven to lead to the most flourishing in our past. Our society demands that everyone radically sacrifice for the purpose of justice and equality, and yet it scratches its head when no one's out there sacrificing. This is because social scientists have begun to point out that our society, it no longer creates self-sacrificers. Our culture is highly consumeristic. It tells people that life is all about being true to yourself and achieving self-actualization. But the worst thing that we can do, our society says, is to be inauthentic and to listen to what someone else has to say. It's up to us to find out who we are on our own and to express it at all cost. Our society is creating self-actualizers instead of self-sacrificers. However, it's the Christian message that flips all this on its head. God Himself, who had all glory and power, gave up everything for us. He gave up status and riches and prestige in heaven and became a helpless baby. He went to the cross and gave up His life. You see, God is the ultimate self-sacrificer, and Christians are called to take up their own crosses and to follow Him, to sacrifice for God and others, because in God we have all we need, and therefore we can give freely as He's done for us. Christianity is what produces a society of self-sacrificers, which is what enables a society to be healthy. A healthy society demands healthy marriages and families. But think about it, a good marriage requires a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. Parenting even more so. Working for justice demands that we give of ourselves for the sake of others. And it's only Christianity that gives people the basis, the fuel to truly sacrifice for others. But Christianity can only preserve our society going forward if the salt remains salty, if we remain distinct from society as Christians. That's when Christians will have the greatest impact on society. And so Keller concludes by appealing to Parliament, saying that if they want the most bang for their buck, if they want to get the most out of Christians, let them be different. Don't make them conform to the world. Instead, have Christians be critiqued on the basis of their own set of beliefs, on their own ideals. And of course, we Christians, we deserve the critique. But how good it will be for our 21st century Western society when it's held to the ideals of infinite worth and dignity for all, and the call to pour ourselves out for the good of our neighbors, our cities, and our world. Truly, it's only the Christian faith that can offer the hope that we need for the 21st century. God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you here soon.